Hello and welcome to today's Delta Credit Tip. Meet Jasmine. Jasmine's a college student. So as a college student, Jasmine, what kind of credit questions do you have?
Well, how do I build credit while I'm still in college?
I'm glad you asked. And stay tuned, we'll answer that question right here on today's Delta Credit Tip. Hello and welcome back to today's Delta Credit Tip. So the question was asked, as a college student, how can you build credit? Usually during college, credit is not exactly a priority, but it's definitely going to be necessary once you graduate. So building credit while you're in school could be a pretty good idea. But then again, that same conundrum we talked about in other videos in establishing credit, where you have to have credit to get credit, as a student, that's even exceptionally more difficult because of the lack of credit history. So how do we do this? Well, here are 4 ways that you can do that even as a college student. And we're going to start with the very first easiest way to do it, and that is become an authorized user, right? If your parents or say an older sibling happens to have an established positive credit card, you can always add yourself as an authorized user. And you can actually forewarn them, no, you don't necessarily have to have access to the card, but you do need to be an authorized user. And what will happen is even without applying for credit, they'll put you on there, they'll report it to the credit bureaus, and you'll start to establish credit history as an authorized user. Okay? But before you sign yourself up to be on that relative's card, you need to ask a couple of questions first. First question is, have you paid it on time? Have you ever paid this credit card 30 days late? If the answer is yes, then your answer is no, thank you, find another card, okay? Also, you need to ask them about the balance. The balance on that credit card needs to be around 30% or less of the limit. If it's above 30% of the limit, it's gonna not really do too much for your score, so you're gonna wanna make sure that they pay those balances down a little bit first, okay? Second way you want to do this, you can always use alternative credit. Okay, alternative credit are your utility bills, your rent. If you're paying rent, if you're living off campus, you can use your rent as what they call alternative credit. So when you're trying to buy a mortgage and perhaps maybe even a car, you can use your positive rental history or with a mortgage utility history as a measure of past performance in your credit history, okay? Number 3, you can always get a secured card. Now with a secured card, you go to your bank, you give them cash, right? And they will use that cash as collateral for your credit card. So you give them $200, they take your $200, hold on to it, and give you a $200 credit card. This is only an option if you have a job. If you have no job, get no credit card. Because here's the problem. If you use that card, you still have to pay it back. And if you do not have income, how are you going to pay it back? Okay? That means you cannot build your credit with department store cards. You cannot build your credit with regular credit cards, a Visa, MasterCard, or whatever. Nor do you want to use secured credit cards because you have no way to pay it back. The one thing I want you guys to remember is that, again, credit is not a score, it's a series of behaviors that make a score. So if you're borrowing money with no income, that's usually a financial mistake. Okay? So if you have a job, you can get a secured credit card, use the credit card, pay it off, use the credit card, pay it off, so that you can build positive credit history. Now, sometimes you may not have enough cash to give the bank to collateralize. They may want $500 at your local bank or something along those lines, right? You can always go online and apply with a Capital One or something like that, but I would prefer in your first couple of transactions on establishing credit, do it at a bank where you can talk to a personal banker so they can answer any questions you may have right up front, okay? So with the inability to come up with cash to secure, if you happen to get grants, and your grant exceeds the amount of money that you need for school, you can use the cash from that grant and exchange it for a credit card. right? So give them the money, then they give it back to you in the form of credit. Notice I didn't say student loans. If you've got student loans that give you in hand excess of what you need for school, you do not want to use that cash to collateralize to get the credit card. Why? Because you're paying interest twice, right? If you borrowed money and then you take that cash and use it as collateral on something that they're charging you interest for, you're paying interest twice on the same dollar. And again, a financial mistake. Okay? The last way that you can build credit while a student is if you happen to have student loans. The good thing is that the payments aren't due, right? They're going to forbear those loans until after you graduate. You're excused of making payments until you have a chance to get out there and start working, right? Just because you're not required to make a payment doesn't mean that you can't make one, right? So if you happen to have income or excess in student loans, start paying them back. Send them $5 every month. You don't want to send $1 because that might not change the actual balance. You want something to, even if it's just for $1, to change that balance to signify a change, right? And that payment history is going to be recorded by the Department of Education, right? Even though there isn't one required. So you'll be able to build your credit while paying on those student loans because there is no payment required, or even though there's no payment required, right? So I hope those 4 ways help. If so, please give it a thumbs up. Also, subscribe below. Most importantly, share the information, right? This is how we stay informed. This is how we collectively help each other to make a choice, to make a change. Delta.